life in Jesus, there's a new life in Him. He will guide you all the way. Hey, hey, there's a new.
Well, happy Sunday, church. It is so good to be here with Shawn. He actually spells it right. Shawn Tyler. We're calling this Shawn Squared. We're here in the office at Missions Link is what it's called. And Shawn has been a missionary in Africa for over 3 decades. Still gets to go sometimes. Right now things are kind of weird.
Annually. This year maybe not. But
who knows? Yeah, it's kind of weird with COVID. But Shawn has a wife, 2 children, 4 grandchildren, and has been here at LCU since you got here in 13?
2012.
12, okay, I'm sorry.
Fall
okay.
of 2012.
Okay. So coming up on 8 years that Shawn's been here in town, and he is a shepherd there at Quaker. So I don't know if you can fire another minister at another church. Is that possible? I hope it's not possible. We'll hopefully not. But no, I'm so excited to have Shawn with me this morning. When I thought about men that were here locally, Shawn's name definitely floated to the top because I think he'll have a lot
I thought
to
you
share.
went through all the list and then I
The
was
last guy.
Yeah.
No, there's actually 13, and you said yes pretty quickly along. This is number 7, but you said yes pretty quickly along, so I had to kind of shuffle mine. But no, I'm very excited to have Shawn, and I know you'll be blessed today too. As you know, we're talking about we're in lesson 7. We're talking about go in peace. This idea, it's the story in Luke chapter 7 where Jesus tells he goes to the Pharisees' house, Simon's house, and a very uninvited guest shows up, and she begins to cry. She begins to wash Jesus' feet with her tears. Wipes it with her hair. Again, I'm actually wearing sandals now, and my feet need some attention, but I would imagine on a dirt road, their feet were just something else.
Yeah.
And this woman immediately begins to show her repentance, her sorrow before Jesus, and he tells her to go in peace. And so we want to talk about that concept today a little bit of go in peace. And I want to start out, Shawn, with just asking you, why do you think, especially with COVID, especially with the economy and all the racial riots, all that's going on in our nation, why is peace important? Why would anybody care about peace?
Oh, wow. Well, what can we do without it? I lived in Africa at a time when they had a coup attempt in Kenya. It's a scary thing to be in a country when all of a sudden somebody tries to kill the president of the country and take over. And so what happened during that time was, our bank system shut down, the telephone system shut down, border shut down, the economy, just absolutely everything kind of ground to a halt. In a way, similar to what's happened here in the sense that everything is just kind of shut down. You can't do anything. You can't go anywhere. Livelihood, everything becomes such a difficult thing. So much better to live in peace than into that kind of chaos or turmoil that comes with not having that peace. So,
yeah, it's funny. I think that's a great imagery of kind of sin and the just out of control feel that we have. Everything is broken in our life. The phones are down. The transportation. Everything's wrong in our life. But Jesus tells this woman to go in peace because her sins have been forgiven. And I think that's something that clearly a lot of people in our world have not experienced. And I think that's part of the unrest.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you see what's going on right now, what's happening in the United States is all of this rioting, this violence and stuff, would really suggest that those people don't have peace in their heart. And there can be a lot of reasons for that. As far as racial inequality or whatever you want to call it, there is pent up frustration and anger that's there, and not hearts of peace.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think there's a lack of control. There's a fear. There's so many things motivating.
Yeah.
What's going on here, and
not to mention that we also have people. I call them kijikos in Africa, a spoon, because we have people that are also stirring the pot. In the United States. Yeah. So those kind of people keep people's hearts and minds and everything stirred up as well. We don't have people who are peacemakers
Right.
in the forefront.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I was thinking there in Matthew 5 where Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. And I'm going blank on, because my favorite's Matthew 5:8, blessed are pure in heart, they'll see God. I think peacemaker, what was the promise with the peacemaker? I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah.
I set myself
Catch
up.
me.
No, but in Matthew 5, he talks about being a peacemaker, and obviously that's Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate peacemaker between us and God. And again, as you consider one of these go statements of Jesus, this idea of go in peace, this woman had deep sorrow. She had deep repentance. Was quickly judged by all those in the room. Simon literally, I guess in his thoughts, he said, if this man were, if he really knew who she was, if he knew the kind of woman she was, and yet Jesus didn't care about her past. Jesus saw a woman that had come in deep sorrow, deep repentance.
You know, what's interesting about this whole thing with Simon, you have to ask yourself, if I had a dinner at my house and you came over, what's the likelihood of somebody just coming in off the street and sitting down anywhere close to the table with us? I mean, it would be impossible.
Yeah.
The fact is that you're seeing a cultural thing happening here that was more common in those days and very common in Africa in the sense of it's more of a collectivistic society, a communal society. Mm-hmm. So that means that any neighbor at any time may come over to your house, and a lot of times the doors are open, and so people will just walk in. Or you're having a meeting and somebody will walk in. I can't tell you the number of times I was standing up and preaching, and a drunk would come in.
Wow.
And sit in the back and
Wow.
then start causing a problem. And the patience of the people dealing with somebody like that is interesting. Simon, here he is giving a banquet. Luke loves banquets. Luke's always having people sitting around tables. And all of a sudden this unwanted person comes in and sits down. And the interesting thing is Simon doesn't say, how did she get in here? Why is she in here?
Yeah.
See, he doesn't even deal with that.
Yeah.
It's a much more open concept. I have a Bible here I wanted to show you. It's called an African Study Bible.
Oh, very cool.
And one of the interesting things about this passage brings out this very point. It says, a sinful woman was so desperate to find forgiveness that she dared to enter a Pharisee's house. She was uninvited, unworthy, and unwelcome. But in yet humility she threw herself at the feet of Jesus. Most commentaries that I have here that come from a Western society don't even mention how in the world did this woman get in the door. Africans know, they understand the concept of having sometimes uncomfortable guests show up in your house, in your living room, while you're sitting there and eating.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I know in West Texas you probably get shot if you walk in somebody's door. In Texas, that's the door's locked for your safety, right? That's what.
But it's okay. So we say that, and then some of the passages say he's a leper. Some of the parallel passages, Matthew, Mark, and Luke say Simon the leper, or it doesn't say leper in Luke. Matthew and Mark says leper. All three of them say Simon. The oddity of that, think about that for a minute. If you talk about a guy who has either been cleansed of the leprosy or is still a leper, the fact that Jesus has come into his house in the first place and is willing to sit with a leper, why in the world is he being, and this shows the hypocrisy or the irony of the story, is that here he is dining with a guy who is a leper, and then he gets upset that this woman comes in and touches Jesus. There's two things. He touches Jesus, and she touches Jesus, and she's a sinner. It's not just the sinner part; it's the fact that she touches him too.
Touches him. Yeah, that's good.
It's irony. The irony of that.
Another level of
It's just amazing to think. Don't you get it? You ought to be happy that he's in your house.
Yeah. Let me add one more level to that. We're quick to judge Simon. We're quick to say, that dude's a bozo. We do the exact same thing. We're quick to say, why would Israel be so rebellious? Why would they? And then I think about my life, and I'm a lot like that.
Yeah,
You know, I see that.
I wrote down, I thought, I can't tell you the number of times we've had a worship service, Wednesday night or Sunday night or something, and somebody comes in off the street, and they're not dressed very nice.
Sure.
And they've got a car and it's all full of luggage and people and stuff, and they come in and they don't smell very good, and they sit in the back of the church, and the thing about it is we want to be polite.
Sure.
Kind of like Simon,
Yeah.
we want to be polite, but you think like, oh no, what do they want? And then they want to ask for something, and we just like, oh, sometimes we struggle, sometimes we try to figure out a way to get out of it. It's awkward. We do the same thing that Simon did. We do the same thing.
Yeah.
We don't respond the way Jesus would have responded to those people coming in the door.
That's good. Yeah. Simon was busy judging Jesus, and this woman is busy repenting. Again, there's so much to learn there, but Jesus goes on to tell a story. Tells a story about two people. One guy was forgiven a huge debt. The other guy was, forgiven a Coke or whatever, a really small debt. And he asked Simon which would be more grateful. And Simon, of course, like you and I would say, well, the guy that was forgiven a lot, and the guy whose debt was the bigger debt that was pardoned. And obviously there's a real story there about understanding our true debt that we owe. What it really did cost to be saved from sin. It wasn't that Jesus was kind of the bonus. It wasn't that we were pretty good and Jesus kind of helped it, or just in case we weren't good enough. There was no hope without Jesus. And Simon didn't really understand that. He didn't understand that we're all the people that have been forgiven much. So the woman comes in and, again, feeling the weight of her sin, she repents. She wipes Jesus with her tears and her feet, and Jesus sends her away in peace. Now, this word peace has a lot of depth to it. It's a statement of tranquility between God and man, but also between man and man. And so I want to talk about this idea of peace for a little bit, because, again, the title is Go in Peace.
Yeah.
And so what does it mean to go in peace? What does it mean to live out that peace? What does it mean that Jesus, in a very real sense, is sending us in peace because of? Well, I'll let you.
Well, I want to go back just a little bit
sure,
to what you were saying about earlier about forgiving much and everything. You can argue that Jesus is pronouncing forgiveness of sins there because of the fact that she comes in and does that. On the other hand, what may fit better for the passage is the fact that she comes in and expresses such gratitude for the forgiveness of sins that she's already experienced. And it is by her demonstration of generosity, of humility, of a brokenness, and everything there that Jesus can say to her, your sins are forgiven. You can tell by the way she does, because she's loving much. Simon hasn't loved very much, and so you get the question of, which one is it that's happening here? Simon seems to be a righteous person, but he's not expressing the same kind of love and appreciation and everything as this woman is. And so what's going on here? Your sins are forgiven. I wrestle with the idea that people don't express the appreciation. We don't keep that and maintain that joy, that sense of, that when I came up out of the water, I was like, and I don't live in that moment as much. I wish I did more. And how would that transform the way I interact with other people on a regular basis? That was an amazing thing there. As to the peace.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute.
I thought that, first of all, you can say, go in peace. In one way, you can say, hey, I interrupted your meal. I created a problem here in the house. Don't worry, it's not a problem. Don't feel bad about that. So as far as we're good.
Yeah, gotcha.
We're good.
Right.
Another thing is, hey, you've lived a horrible life, and you've been an outcast. You've been looked down on and everything. And I just want to say to you, go in peace. It's okay. You're okay. Maybe an inner peace, an emotional peace from all of that. And then, of course, like you mentioned, maybe a spiritual peace, being at one with God, having been separated, cast out, different, becoming a child of God. I love one of the other passages, in one of the other books having to do with, I think it's Luke 5, where he talks about, daughter, your faith has saved you. Daughter, go in peace.
Yeah.
I love the idea of daughter. That's not used very often.
No.
And,
I think that's the only time, in fact. Are you talking about the one the bleeding one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. In the passage I was thinking about was in Mark 5. It's that same story, but I think that's the only time that Jesus uses that. Yeah.
It's an interesting passage because both the little girl and they're both daughters
Right.
in that passage. The idea of relationship and all is good. Being at the table, just off the wall. I'll do a rabbit trail here.
That's good.
In Uganda, they have a phrase called Oluganda Hulia, which means brotherhood is eating. You don't really have a relationship with anybody unless you sit down at a meal and you share in eating with each other. And so right before this story happens in Luke 7, Jesus is accused of being a friend of the sinners. And then it's demonstrated or illustrated by the fact that he goes and responds to this sinner so much so that it's shocking, it's scandalous to the Pharisee in the story. He's a friend of the sinners. And I'm reminded of the passage, you remember in Revelation, I stand at the door and knock, and whoever opens up, I'll come in and eat with you and you eat with me. Yeah. And there's a sense of relationship and friendship there. That this happens around a table. He eats with sinners.
A lot of depth there too.
He eats with sinners.
Yeah.
Oh my.
A lot of depth. Yeah. Even I'm guessing you're also alluding to even what we call the Lord's Supper or communion or
and isn't it amazing that we sit down and we would eat with him and we'll do this again and there's a big banquet in heaven. We're gonna sit down. This concept of sharing a meal is so important. Jesus is doing with the Pharisee, which only happens in Luke, incidentally. He only sits down and eats with Pharisees in Luke.
Oh, really? Okay.
And every time he does, it doesn't turn out well. He always does something that's scandalous or shocking to them. Yeah. And causes problems. But
how funny. Well, I guess to kind of start on the descent, I'm thinking about how does this play out in me being a disciple and making disciples? What am I supposed to do with this lesson? This idea of go in peace, this idea of maybe loving the unlovable or the rejected, any of those things. I'll let you just kind of pick your topic and go with it.
I would start off with inner first. I would say we need to understand the message here that Jesus, once we embrace him, once we come in and we're walking with him, that we should have an inner peace. And recognize that the peace that we have because of him is greater than or doesn't depend upon our outside circumstances. He talks about that peace I leave with you in John. Right. It's not that the world understands that kind of a peace. It's a different kind of peace. And if that is central to us on the inside, that's going to enable us to be peacemakers, to be able to then go out and extend that, to go in peace and be a person of peace and reconciliation to the world outside. And it has to start here. Yeah. It has to start here.
Good.
And then it goes out. Of course, how? Man, I would say every time you meet somebody. I want to confess, I do something. When I go to the bank, I go in every time. I don't use an ATM and I don't use a drive-through. And it's not because, and I want you to tell you, anybody young here, it's not because I don't know how to work those things.
What are all the buttons for?
It's not that.
Right.
I go in with the purpose to make that teller smile.
That's good, yeah.
And it's an amazing thing. I go down to the Bank of America on 19th District by University. One of the assistants of the bank, every time I walk in, she calls me by name.
Oh, wow.
And I know about her, I know about her husband, I know about her children.
That's me at Starbucks.
Yeah. That's you at Starbucks?
Yeah.
Well, and that's the point that I would say is if we're going to be people of peace, we need to get to the point where we stand out. We're concerned about. We want to know about. We're interested in other people, and we want to bridge that gap and not be in there and say, "Hey, I've only got 5 minutes. Hurry up and do my business here."
Yeah.
I go in with the intention of connecting.
Mm.
One of the other tellers in there, I do the cash in the envelope type thing,
Oh yeah, we do that
budget
too.
stuff.
Yeah, that's
You do
good.
that?
Yeah.
And that lady knows about it, and she always asks me, "How you coming along?" I said, "I'm doing great." And she said, "I need to do that." How would they even know unless I've stopped and spent time talking to them?
Yeah, ATM wouldn't have. Yeah.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't need a,
Yeah.
I don't need a relationship with an ATM.
Right. That's good. That's good. I'm when you were mentioning that, I'm thinking about in Luke 10, just a few chapters later, where Jesus talks about go and find a person of peace.
Yeah.
Find that person, and so being that person is so important as well. Being that person that just kind of exudes peace. Just kind of.
I was reading a book on Marcus Aurelius, 2nd century, Roman emperor. He said to listen intently to the other person and listen so closely that you can be in their mind. And I thought to myself, we don't do that these days. We are too busy wanting to say what we want to say.
Yeah.
And I think a person of peace was going to be into that other person and understand that person, listen to that other person, so that you can understand and see it from their perspective. That is necessary for a person of peace, to go in peace.
Yeah.
And until we do that, I sat in on one time. I was in a big meeting where they had a big argument and fight, and so they brought in a professional
Like a
negotiator.
mediator. Okay. Yeah.
And the first thing he did was he stood up in the front and said, "Hey, I'm a visitor here. I really don't understand what the situation is. Could somebody please help me to understand?" And he spent 2 hours letting everybody say stuff, and he would write on a whiteboard, "Okay, so what you're saying is," and he would repeat, and if they didn't say it right, then he would adjust it, and he would write everything on the board, and he just drew everything out of everybody to where there was no other complaint. He allowed everybody to express their frustration. He showed them by repeating it back that he heard them, and he had written everything on the board. And he said, "Is there anything else?" It was amazing to watch how he completely deflated the tension in that room because he listened and he heard, he understood what they were doing. I think that's part of going in peace, being able to do that kind of thing.
Good. Yeah. This theme of relationship has come up again and again through all this. Skipping the ATM, the drive-through or whatever, to be able to make eye contact with somebody, to be able to talk to somebody, being a good listener, just caring about people, realizing how much we've been forgiven. Man, just such a wealth. This has been a great class. Thank you so much, Shawn. I'm so thankful that Shawn welcomed me into his office over here and allowed me an hour of his time to be able to talk about this passage in Luke chapter 7. Anything you want to say to Greenlawn? There might be 1 or 2 people that'll watch this. So anything that you would want to say to the church?
Hey, I would say come, visit. I would love to visit. I'm always interested in making new friends, building bridges. I think that's one of the things about my personality is I love to find new people, new friends. I want to be able to encourage and at the same time be encouraged by other people. I'm interested in partnering together in being a peacemaker. What can I do to help you? What can you do to help me in this community and in this state about making peace? I love that.
Very good. Well, I hope this was a blessing to you. I was blessed by this and encouraged by Shawn's words, his depth of knowledge, and even just some practical stories, some things that have happened throughout his life and some of his experience in Africa. So we want to wish you, as Jesus would say, to go in peace. And again, we want to encourage you to share that peace with others. Have a great week.
Bye.
He can help you love your neighbor if you'll let his light shine through. All your problems will seem little when he lives inside of you. He will help to lift you up when you're really